Okay, so today's daf is Samach Aleph, and we're starting Samach Bet, Amud Bet, the very bottom of the page, but not really. I'm sorry, Samach Amud Bet, yeah, the very bottom of the page. V'lo biyachid b'zman she'en beraglo makah. Really, that's just the introduction. So really, we're starting on Samach Aleph, Amud Aleph, but the part of the Mishnah that we're going to be commenting on is written on Samach Amud Bet at the bottom, where it says v'lo biyachid b'zman she'en beraglo makah. So it talked about going out with only one shoe. One is not supposed to go out with only one shoe on Shabbat. Rashi quotes two explanations of why this is. His own explanation is that if a person goes out with one shoe only, people who see that are going to assume he's carrying the other shoe under his arm. Okay, that's one possibility. The other possibility is what his teachers say, is that the reason why, Rashi quotes his own teachers and says that they said that the reason why you can't wear only one shoe is because people will make fun of you for wearing only one shoe, and you'll end up taking off the shoe and walking but carrying it because you're not going to want to be embarrassed that you're wearing only one shoe. Why did you leave home wearing only one shoe to begin with? We don't know the answer to that. Okay, sit down. So now the Gemara says like this: Hayesh beraglo makah nafik. But what the Mishnah says is, if you have beraglo makah, if you have on your foot a wound on your foot, so then you're allowed to wear only one shoe. But on which foot is this shoe going? In other words, it says when you have a wound in your foot, you're allowed to wear one shoe. What does that mean? So Amar Rafuna says, that it means to say that you put the shoe on the wounded foot. In other words, if a person has an injury in their foot and they're wearing one shoe, where's the shoe? The shoe is on the injured foot. And a person says, oh, I understand why he's wearing only one shoe, because he has an injured foot. Okay? In other words, they're not going to assume you're carrying a shoe under your arm, and they're not going to make fun of you because they're going to feel bad for you because you're disabled. So they're going to see that you have a wound, and your foot is the only reason why you have one shoe is because of the wound. Which means to say that he interprets sandal. He interprets what is the reason why the person wears a shoe? He wears a shoe because he wants to prevent tsar. He wants to prevent pain, and maybe his healthy foot is very rugged, and he's not very sensitive, so he's able to walk barefoot. The only thing is, because he has a wound in one foot, it's oversensitive, and he needs a shoe. The Chiyah Barav says, which foot has the shoe on it? The one that doesn't have the makah, the one that doesn't have the injury. So imagine like a person walking with a cast. So which foot is going to have the shoe on it? The one without the cast, obviously. You're not going to be able to put the shoe on the foot with the cast. So what does that mean? Al makasavar l'shum ta'anug avid. That the reason why a person wears a shoe is because of pleasure, because it's comfort to wear a shoe. And v'zosh ba makata muchachat alea. And it's clear that the person who has, let's say, a cast or another wound on his foot, he can't get any comfort in that foot anyway, because it's already injured. So therefore, he's walking with one foot. Well, yeah, that's why we don't wear leather shoes on Yom Kippur. It's considered a pleasure to wear shoes. So therefore, because it's ta'anug, so Rashi says, Adam istanis virach. A person is generally very sensitive, and he needs comfort. But we see, why did he put a shoe on one foot? Because generally he's very sensitive. But that other foot, the foot that is injured, he's not going to put a shoe on it, because imagine he has a cast or a bandage or whatever, he's not going to put a shoe on that foot, he's going to put a shoe on the foot that is otherwise doing fine. So he's walking with he's dragging a wounded leg, let's say, and on the foot that is okay, he has a shoe.
So they're viewing wearing shoes as unnecessary. It's just like a pleasure.
That's why you have nilata sandal on Yom Kippur.
Otherwise
you would walk barefoot. Apparently so. Yeah, so that's and therefore a person is not going to be suspected again of carrying their shoe. They're not going to be made fun of for having only one shoe, because it's going to be obvious that the reason that they have only one shoe is because they only need the shoe on the foot that is in good health. But the injured foot, there's no purpose in putting a shoe on it. It's not going to offer any comfort because the foot is in pain anyway. That Rabbi Yochanan also agrees with Rav Huna that where is the shoe going? On the injured foot. Because once Rabbi Yochanan said to Rav Shimon bar Abba, Havli misanai, please give me my shoes. Because Rav Shimon bar Abba was his student, so he asked him to bring him his shoes. And what did he do? Yahav le diyamin, he gave him the right shoe. Now as we learned in the halakha class on Thursdays, Rabbi Yochanan holds that you have to put on the left shoe first. So Rav Shimon bar Abba, that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. So the Rav Shimon bar Abba gave him the right shoe. So why did he give him the right shoe when he knows that he has to put on the left shoe first? So he said to him, Amar le asito maka, you made my foot like an injured foot. What does that mean? Because he said, you're giving me the right shoe, which means if I put on the right shoe, according to Rabbi Yochanan, once you put on the right shoe, you can't put the left anymore. Right? So if I put the right shoe, you're going to make me walk only with one shoe. And which shoe am I going to be wearing? I'm going to be wearing the shoe on the right foot only. And that's going to mean that it's going to look like my right foot is injured. Right? It's going to look like my right foot is injured. So what does the Gemara say? Why? Because I'll be walking with only one foot. With only one shoe, rather. And that one shoe is going to be presumed to be on the foot that is injured. Because apparently Rabbi Yochanan is holding like Rav Huna, that says that the shoe goes on the foot that's injured. But that's not necessarily true because Vidil Makyachya bar Rav Zvir Ale, maybe Rabbi Yochanan really holds that the shoe would go on the foot that's not injured. That's what it means. Asita shel simol maka, that by giving me the right shoe and I put it on the right foot and I can't now put my left shoe on, you made it seem like the left foot is injured. In other words, he didn't say you made my right foot look injured. He said you made me look like I have an injury. But that you can't prove which shoe Rabbi Yochanan thinks you're supposed to put the shoe on, whether it's the one that has the injury or the one that doesn't have the injury. Okay, you can't prove it either way. V'azda Rabbi Yochanan l'tamei, and Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his own reasoning. Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, "Katfilin kach min alin," because he said just like tefillin is shoes. Ma tefillin bismol, just like when it comes to tefillin, what do you put it on? You put it on your left hand. So af min alin bismol. Similarly, when you put on your shoe, you have to put your left shoe first. That's according to Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore, with the right shoe only, he would have only one shoe. But we can't tell from that Rabbi Yochanan thinks that when somebody has an injured foot, they're supposed to put they're allowed to put the one shoe on the injured foot, or they're allowed to put one shoe on the healthy foot. The halakha, by the way, is like Rabbi Chia bar Rav, that you put the shoe on the uninjured foot, that you're allowed to put one shoe on the uninjured foot, meaning you can put a shoe on your right foot, let's say if your left foot has a cast on it or is injured otherwise. Okay, the injured foot is the one that doesn't get the shoe, according to the halakha and the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe there is an objection. But it says in a Braita that when you put on your shoes, you're supposed to put your right shoe on first. So how can Rabbi Yochanan say you're supposed to put your left shoe on first? Amar Rav Yosef said, Hashtadatan Yachi, Fam Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Since we see in a Braita that you're supposed to put your right shoe on, and Rabbi Yochanan said you're supposed to put your left shoe on, Da'avad Hachi Avad, or Da'avad Hachi Avad, that means that either way is right. Meaning that there are two justifiable positions, and one can choose one or the other as long as you're consistent. That's what Tosafot says it means. In other words, there are reasons to favor the right side, like most mitzvot are done with the right hand. Okay, the right hand is usually the dominant hand. On the other hand, when it comes to tefillin, the left is dominant. So one can argue for the right side, one can argue for the left side. So at least be consistent. Either do right or do left.
Is it out of order to ask what the justification is for the left shoe? Or
yeah, well, that's tefillin. That's the justification. Because we favor the left in a certain respect. You can see that that's what he said, just like tefillin, because
that's a justification for putting.
That's a justification for the left side that you put on tefillin. That tefillin goes on your left arm.
So anything would start.
But any other mitzvah, usually you do with your right hand.
I know that.
Right. So that's the justification or the basis for doing the right first.
Yeah, but that's
true.
It's got to be something about shoes particularly, because it doesn't say the same thing about like when you put your pants on, you
put your right leg in. Well, it would seem that the reason seems to be because of tying, because you tie shoes and you tie tefillin.
So what if you have shoes that don't have ties?
We'll get to that in a second. We'll see in a second. Yes.
If you're left-handed, then you're putting the shoe on the right hand, right first.
Oh, you mean do you switch it?
Yeah.
See, they don't talk about that issue with regard to shoes, whether it switches for a lefty. So it could be that it just goes by the general, the majority being righty. So therefore they follow the majority. It could be.
These justifications are like the idea, the Kabbalah ideas you put on the right.
It's not Kabbalah. That's not Kabbalah. That's not Kabbalah. That's coming in two more opinions. You have to just wait. Yeah, that's not Kabbalah. Actually, we had a big discussion about this when we did this. We did in the Thursday night halacha class, and I said, I bet you think that this is from Kabbalah, but I'm going to show you that it's not. It's right here in the Gemara, and we talked about it in that Thursday class. So we're going to see in just 1 second. So
is that a halacha d'oraita?
no, of course not. So Amar le Abai said to him, Dilma Rabbi Yochanan hamatnitin lo hava shemiyale. V'hava shemiyale hava hadarbe. How do you know that Rabbi Yochanan is offering an alternative opinion? Maybe he just wasn't aware of this baraita, because it sometimes would happen that they didn't know all the baraitot. There were many of them. So maybe he said the left shoe first because he wasn't familiar with this baraita. Or alternatively, maybe it's not two viable options. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan is aware of what the Baraita says and he rejects it. So how can you come along and say that there are two viable options here? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Yireh Shamayim Yotzei Yedei Shetehen, that one who fears God will fulfill both sides of the both sides. How umanu marbrei deravna marbrei deravna fulfilled both sides. Hechi avid, how did he do it? Sayem dimine velo katar v'sayem dismale v'katar. What he did was he put on the right shoe, but he didn't tie it. He put on the left shoe and he tied it, and then he tied the right. So that way, so therefore, in terms of putting on, okay, when it comes to putting on, he put on right first. But when it came to tying, he tied left first. So why does that make sense? It makes sense because since the whole reason to favor the left is because of tefillin, and what do you do on tefillin? You tie. Okay, so therefore it makes sense that you would put the right on first, but you would tie the left first. So that's the reason why that's where it comes from. And in the Shulchan Aruch, that's what's codified in the Shulchan Aruch. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to put your right on first, then tie your left first. That this is actually the real reason, the original reason. I mean, there could be other reasons, but this is the original reason. It's this halacha. So what you see is that many people think this is based on Kabbalah. It's not actually based on Kabbalah. It's actually based on the Talmud.
Kabbalah is based on this.
But the Kabbalah is based on this. So the Shulchan Aruch talks about what about a shoe that doesn't have tie. We talked about this in the halacha class on Thursday a few weeks ago. That if it doesn't have tying, so then you put the right on first. But if it has laces, then you put the right, then the left, and you tie left, tie right. That's the seder. If there are no laces involved, so then you just do right first.
Well, no, there's like Kabbalah stores here. They don't say. They just say like that's how you're supposed to do it. But
right, but there's another. Well, because he said because of tefillin.
So
you say because tefillin, yeah, that's the reason, yeah. So,
but so then you could argue that if you're left-footed, that just like your left hand, you can switch.
Well, that's what he said. What about if a person is left-handed and they put on their tefillin on the right? That's a question. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says: right, put on your right, put on left, tie right. Right. That's what it says. Shulchan Aruch. So then you have. So then it says Amar Rav Asher. Rav Asher says Chazina Rav Kahana de lo kapid, that I saw Rav Kahana. He didn't care about any of this. He just did whatever. So many say, some Rishonim say, well, he has the last word. Right? That's the last word in the Gemara. So that's why, for example, the Rambam doesn't mention it. So many people think, the Rambam doesn't mention it, because it's Kabbalah, because it's based on Kabbalah. That's not true. Because it's not based on Kabbalah. It's right here in the Talmud. It's just that the Rambam thought that Rav Kahana was the last word. And usually Rav Asher is the last word. And he's the one who says, I saw Rav Kahana didn't care about this. So he didn't care about it either.
There are Kabbalistic reasons and logic for why it's done.
Right. Well, there can be.
Copies even says do it. There's a whole business of right.
Of course, right. But there's a revealed reason, you could say. There's a halachic reason, and then beyond that, many times you'll have, for example, there's a halachic reason that's given in the Shulchan Aruch for why people put on tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. But in Kabbalah, tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam is a huge thing for Kabbalistic reasons, and the Zohar brings it. So it's a for a totally different dimension there. So you can have a halachic basis to do it, and a purely halachic person will have a reason. But then if you get into the nistar and the hidden reason, there's a whole different dimension there. So that's true here as well. So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught kishu noel shel yamin v'achar kach noel shel simol, kishu choletz shel simol v'achar kach choletz shel yamin. This is also brought in Shulchan Aruch, that when you put on your shoe, you put on the right first, then the left. When you remove them, you take off the left, and then you take off the right. And again, that's giving primacy to the right, because just like you put on the right first, and then you put on the left, so too when you take it off, you want to let the right foot be the last to have its shoe removed. That's giving primacy to the right side. When a person takes a shower, rochetz shel yamin v'achar kach rochetz shel simol. So here it does mention it in other things, not just in shoes, that you should wash the right side before the left side. When you put on anointing, you anoint your right side before your left side. Okay, and when you plan to not just do the right and the left, but you plan to anoint your entire body, including your head, you should always do the head first, because the head is the king of all the Evarim, of all of the parts of the body. So I guess if you put a shoe on your head, you would put that on first too, but we don't do that.
So if you do a tahara, I'm sure that applies to.
Yeah, these things are.
Start with the right side.
Yeah, the right side.
You wash the right side first, and then the.
Well, the right is.
Tahara meant when you start with we wash the head.
The right first.
But do you do the right because you go to
the right side.
Right is okay.
The right side first.
Yeah. So look.
According to that, you should put your hat on first before you put your shoes.
Put your shoes on. Yeah, there you go. Of course you put it. Well, you're not even Jewish until you have your hat on. So it's so how could you even do any mitzvah without that?
You do put your hat on first.
That's true. That's true. You have to keep on. Keep on first. But you're not even Jewish without the hat anyway. So no mitzvah would apply to you until you put the hat. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're patur from. So v'lo batfilin. So v'lo batfilin. So you going out with tefillin, you can't go out with tefillin on Shabbat. So we're going to see just. But the truth is that if you did go out with tefillin on Shabbat, you're not chayav chatat. You didn't violate Shabbat formally. So Amar Rav Safra said, Lo tema ali b'demand Amar Shabbat lav zaman tefillinu. So it's very tempting to think that this halacha that you can't go outside on Shabbat wearing tefillin is only according to the one that says you're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbat, so therefore it's considered carrying. Ella afilu leman damar Shabbat zaman tefillin, or even according to the opinion that says that Shabbat could have tefillin. Everybody agrees you don't have to wear tefillin on Shabbat, but some might say that you could wear tefillin on Shabbat. We don't hold that way. We hold that you're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbat. But according to the one that says Shabbat, that tefillin is applicable to Shabbat, and one could wear tefillin on Shabbat in theory. So even he says you can't wear it out. Why? Because remember, in those days the bathrooms were outside. So you're walking along with your tefillin on Shabbat, wearing them, and you come across. You have to go to the bathroom. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to take off the tefillin in order to go to the bathroom. And then what's going to happen? You're going to end up carrying. You're going to forget that it's Shabbat. You're going to carry your tefillin, and that would be no good. So that's why. Some apply this halacha to the end of the to the latter clause of the Mishnah, that there were 2 points made in the Mishnah. Number one, that you don't go out into the public domain wearing tefillin on Shabbat, and secondly, that if you did, it wasn't considered a biblical violation of Shabbat. And some come along to qualify that statement. That's not only true. In other words, you might be tempted to say that there are 2 different positions here. One position says that tefillin applies on Shabbat, and he would say that you could wear it out on Shabbat, or that if you wore it out on Shabbat, you would not be considered in violation of Shabbat. And the one that says that tefillin isn't worn on Shabbat would say that you can't wear it on Shabbat, and that you are obligated or you are liable for your violation of Shabbat if you wore it out. But that's not true. Everybody agrees that you're not allowed to wear it out, and everybody agrees that if you did, you are not liable for violating Shabbat. Even the one that says you're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbat is going to agree that if you did so and you wore the tefillin out, that it's not considered a violation of Shabbat.
So does everybody agree that you are chayav chatat if you were to tefillin on Shabbat?
No, everybody agrees that you're not. if you wear it out.
Not chaychat, but you said everybody agrees that you're not supposed to.
Everybody agrees you're not supposed to, but that it's only rabbinical.
It's only okay.
Yeah. So even according to the one that says that tefillin is not to be worn on Shabbat, he'll agree that if you wore it out on Shabbat, it's not a biblical violation of Shabbat. Why? Because you're wearing it. It's definitely considered ornamentation. It's definitely considered wearing. It's not considered carrying to have tefillin on. So even according to one that says you're not really supposed to be wearing tefillin on Shabbat, he's not going to call it carrying the tefillin because you're wearing it, even though maybe it's a wearing that shouldn't be done. Yeah, what do you want to say?
So, but the same issue should be raised about talit. We have people who wear talit in the street,
right?
And you can't wear talit into the bathroom. And
True. But really, halachically, you could wear talit in the bathroom. The only difference is that really, talit you're allowed to wear in the bathroom. It's just a minhag not to wear in the bathroom. So it's just a custom because it doesn't look nice. But really, you could wear because we're tzitzit, and in those days, that would mean you had to go naked because they wore tzitzit actually on their main garment.
Right.
So no, you don't have to actually take talit off.
Okay.
It's just that's why. So what halacha is the basis of? That's why if you take your talit off to go into the bathroom, you don't have to say a bracha when you come out. Because really, you could have worn the talit even into the bathroom.
Right.
It's just a custom not to. So that's why when you come out of the bathroom, you don't have to say a bracha on the talit again. But if you took off your tefillin and went in the bathroom, then you have to say a bracha when you come out again because you really ended the mitzvah because you couldn't wear tefillin into the bathroom. So that's actually a halachic basis for that. Yeah. So you can't wear an amulet when it's gotten from a non-professional. So as we gave you the example, if you got from the Baba Saleh, a nice kamea, you could wear that. But if you got from the shmagegi who stands outside the kotel and he sells red strings and amulets, so then you get. Yeah, I like that word. There's no other word. There's no other word that describes.
So you got it from Baba Saleh.
He wasn't a wholesaler. Yeah. So anyway, so Rav Papa said, "Lo tema." So it says it has to be from a professional. Okay, if it's not from a professional, why? Because you're not gonna take it as seriously. You might take it off. Right? So he says, Lo tema'ad mumche gavra umumche kamea. Don't assume that both the writer of the kamea and the kamea itself have to be experts. What does it mean, the writer of the kamea? It means that if he wrote 3 different kameot, and they all, 3 different ones, totally different ones for 3 different illnesses, then he, and all of them healed the recipient, then he's called a mumche. If he wrote the same one, if the same one was written 3 times by 3 different people, then the kamea is mumche, meaning it's tested. But the individuals have only written 1 each, so they're not tested. Okay, if the writer has written 3 different ones, then we can say he obviously knows what he's doing. Because all 3 of his, and they were different ones, all worked. Okay, it doesn't have to be that both the writer and the kamea are mumchim. But even if the writer has an established reputation, he's written several different kameot, they all worked. He's never written this one before, but he is an established kamea writer, so then it's a reliable kamea. Dikanami, we can see a proof for this in our Mishnah, Dikatane, because it says because it says you can't go out with a kamea when it's not from a mumche. So it's talking about the person. It doesn't refer to the kamea itself and say that the kamea itself has to be a tested kamea. It just says that the person from whom you purchased it has to be a professional shemamina. Therefore, you see that even if Rav Kaduri or Baba Saleh is writing this kamea for the first time, he's never written this particular one, since he is a mumche, you're going to consider that reliable. You're not going to take it lightly. It doesn't have to be that he's written the same one 3 times and it worked every time. Okay? So now the Gemara says, the rabbis taught, Ezu kamea mumche. What is considered a tested and established kamea? Kol sheripa v'shana v'shalosh. Anything that 3 times has healed works. Echad kameh shel ketav, ve'echad kameh shel ikarin. There were two different kinds of kameot. One was that you went and they wrote you a certain tefillah, or they wrote you certain verses, pesukim, whatever they were, and they put that in a pouch and you hung that on your neck. The other one was certain herbs that they would mix, which was more like medicinal. It was like homeopathic medicine or whatever, that they would mix these herbs, and these herbs were supposed to have healing properties, and you would wear them. Okay? Echad cholesh sheish bo sakana, ve'echad cholesh she'en bo sakana. Whether you are in danger, in other words, whether you are physically, that this is an illness that is a grave illness, or it's an illness that's a lighter illness, it doesn't matter. You're still not going to take the kameah off if it's a kameah that is established to have healing powers. Okay? And not just a person who has fallen ill, but even a person who's, for preventative reasons, is afraid of falling ill and is therefore wearing this to ward off illness. It's still okay. And you're allowed to tie it and untie it even in the Reshut HaRabim. In other words, if you're standing outside, you can adjust it. You can untie it and retie it around your neck on Shabbat, even outside, as long as you don't carry it, obviously. But you cannot tie it onto a bracelet, hang it on a bracelet, or hang it on your ring, because then it looks like an ornament instead of a medicinal thing. It has to be clear that it's tied around your neck, which is the way that they used to tie them for medicinal purposes. And so he can't tie it to his ring or to a chain, to a bracelet or to a ring, and go out in the public domain, mishum marit ha'ayin, because it looks like he's wearing some additional ornament that he's not supposed to be wearing on Shabbat. But if he puts it around his neck in the normal way, that's allowed. And even if he's not sick, even if it's just preventative, and even if he just has a cold, whatever it is, he's allowed to wear this on Shabbat because he's not going to take it off. V'hatanya, but we learned in a braita, ezu kameh mumche kol sheripa gimel bnei adam ki achad. We learned in a braita, you just told me that if the same kameah healed the same person 3 times, it's tested. But we learned elsewhere that it has to heal 3 different people to be considered tested, not the same person. Okay? So, how do we resolve this contradiction? So the answer is, ha lemachuye gavra. Look, Kasha, it's no problem. Ha lemachuye gavra, ha lemachuye kameah. It depends. If what you were trying to determine is whether this person is a reliable kameah writer, then if he wrote the same kameah 3 times for the same person, it's no good. He has to write 3 different kameot to demonstrate that he is good. If he wrote the same kameah 3 times, even for 3 different people, it's the same thing. So the only thing it's proven is that kameah. We wouldn't say that therefore this person, anything he writes is going to be good. We don't know that. So to show that anything he writes is good, he has to write 3 different ones.
What we do learn, from tradition, is that, obviously there are huge implications in here, because yes, there are people who are mikubalim and are able to actually have access to certain energies and do this kind of healing. But then there are also the ones, and those are the ones that were not allowed, and that's huge. It's a huge problem because it's easy to confuse the two.
Right.
A sorcerer,
but it's
not that the sorcerer is not capable to, because the sorcerer sometimes
maybe he's able to do something.
Have the ability to.
He figured something out that he could.
Yeah, they do have that ability, and it's not.
Well, it's like you go to a crank doctor. Some of the doctors that are not legit, once in a while they have something. You never know. But it's interesting how scientific it is, in the sense that they're saying that if this person wrote the same thing 3 times, the only thing we could say is that particular thing works. If he wrote 3 different things, okay, for 3 different situations, so now the guy looks pretty good. None of those individual amulets are necessarily good every time, but that guy obviously knows what he's doing. If somebody else wrote one of them, maybe not. So Rashi says the only time that we really can be sure of both the person and the amulet is if that guy wrote 3 of each of them, okay, and each time each of the 3 worked, so then it would seem like the amulet is tested and the person is tested too.
9.
Okay. Right, 9 would take. Amar Papa says, Pshita li tilat kameh, tilat gavra, tilat zimnei, it mechay gavra, v'it mechay kameh. That's what he says. If you had 3 people, 3 different diseases, and 3 different kameot, and he did it 3 times each. In other words, so this writer has written a total of 9, because there were 3 people, and he wrote 3 times. Right? Each kameh was written 3 times for each of the 3 different people. So then, so in that case, we say that both the person is tested because he wrote 3 different things and they all worked, and the kameot were tested because each kameh was written 3 times and was tested. But tlata kameh tlata gavrei. So if there were 3 amulets written for 3 people, chad zimna, each one was only written 1 time. In other words, so the one kameh writer wrote 1, 2, 3, each individual a separate kameh. So then gavra itmechei kameh lo itmechei. So he's proven that he can do something because we see that he wrote 3 different things and all 3 worked. But that doesn't prove about any one of those individual kameot that it's good. It just shows that the writer was good. Chad kamea litlata gavrei kamea itmechei gavra lo itmechei. If the writer wrote 1 kamea for 3 different people, so all we see is this kamea worked 3 times. We can't necessarily say that the writer is so good. Maybe it was just that kamea works for anybody. Ba'era Papa had the following question: Tlata kamea lechad gavra, mai. So what do we do if he wrote 3 kameot, but they were all for the same person? Okay, so he wrote. It wasn't the same kameh 3 times, because then we know that it would only prove the kameh was good. But 3 different kameot, but he wrote it for the same patient. So what do we do? So kameh vadai lo itmechei. Gavra itmechei. So we know that none of the individual kameot were proven because each one was written only 1 time for this patient. Okay, but was the person proven? But the question is, Gavra itmechei o lo itmechei. What do we say about the person? Mi amrinan ha'asele. Do we say that since he wrote 3 different prescriptions, so to speak, and each one of them worked for this patient, therefore he's good? O dilma mazlad dahai gavra dekam mekabel kitava. Or maybe it's just that this patient is a really good patient. Okay, so because if a doctor, it's like if the doctor writes 3 different prescriptions, using a doctor as an example, for the same patient, and each time this patient is healed, maybe they're just really susceptible to being healed. We can't say anything about the doctor, and we can't say anything about any individual prescription because each prescription he only wrote once. So the question is, do we say since he wrote 3 different prescriptions and each one seems to have had an effect on this one patient, therefore the doctor is good? Or do we say no, since you need a larger sample size, you need at least 3 patients, that if he was able to succeed with 3 different patients at least once, now it looks like he's pretty good.
Or 3 machalot for the same.
Right. But if it's 3 different, here we're talking about 3 different things for the same patient. So now we could say that the patient, maybe it's the patient's, no, even if it's 3 different diseases, because there are 3 different kameot. 3 different kameot for this one guy, but it was only 1 patient, so maybe he just has a good mazal. Someone's looking out for him, right? It says so it says mazala. It says mazal. Rashi says maybe he has a good guardian angel upstairs that's taking care of him. So we cannot really resolve whether that means that anything about this particular doctor or not. All we know is that the patient is really receptive to treatment. Ibailu, they asked a question: Kamen yesh ben mishum kiddusha, o dilma in ben mishum kiddusha. So do we say that kameot? Remember, kameot oftentimes had the name of God in them. Do they have holiness or not? Lemay hilchata, what is the halachic implication of whether they have kedusha or not? Is the concern that if there's a fire, now the halacha is if there's a fire in a house, God forbid on Shabbat, so you want to save things from the house, you're allowed to save a minimum amount of food, but not too much, because they didn't want people to go crazy and end up violating Shabbat in excess in order to save everything. So they gave you a minimum amount you're allowed to save. And one of the things you're allowed to save is kitvei kodesh, as we're going to learn later in this Masekhet, the beginning of the parak talks about kitvei kodesh and what you're allowed to save from a fire. So are they considered kitvei kodesh, these amulets that have God's name in them? Should we consider, or they have pesukim or whatever, do they have kedusha that we would have to save them from a deleka, from a fire on Shabbat? Now we're talking about saving it and taking it not into the public domain, but taking it into the chatzer, taking it into a courtyard, which is not a biblical violation of Shabbat.
Well,
so
the real question is, do these have a higher kedusha than other kitvei kodesh that are yud ke vav ke? But whereas the amulet has, some real name of,
Well, let's see for a second. So Tashma, come and listen. Habrachot v'kamein, blessings and kameot. Af b'sheish behen otiyot, even though they have letters, u'me'inyanot harbeh shebatorah, and they have many topics of the Torah in them. In matzilin otan p'mei adeleka v'nisrafim b'mkoman. You don't save them from the fire. In other words, even if you had brachot, even sidurim, that would mean. In other words, brachot here means like you have the text of the brachot of Rosh Hashanah. He gives as an example that you're not allowed to save them on Shabbat if there's a fire. You can only save actual kitvei HaKodesh like Sifrei Torah and things like that. Ela le'inyan gniza, rather is what you mean gniza. That what do you have to put in gniza? Like in the Shemot, what do you have to put in gniza? So he says, if that's the question, Tashma, come and listen. Hayakatuv al yadot hakelim ve'al karei hamita yagor ve'ignizenu. Anything that has the name of Hashem on it, you have to put in gniza. Even if you wrote on the handle of a pot Hashem's name. Even if you wrote on your bed Hashem's name. Okay, anything. There's actually a problem. What if you tattoo Hashem's name on your arm? So then the Talmud has a whole issue about what do. You can't take a shower because you might erase it. You have to cover it when you go in the shower. So any place where God's name is written, you have to put it in geniza. You're not allowed to throw it in the trash. So certainly kameot, you're not allowed to throw them in the trash. You would have to bury them if they have God's name in them. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have Kiddusha on the level of a Sefer Torah that you have to save it from a fire. Okay? Ela, rather, what is it? Likanes ben bebet hakisei. Can you go into the bathroom with these amulets that have God's name in them? So, my yesh ben Kiddusha v'asir, o dilma, and ben Kiddusha v'sharei. Do we say that they have holiness and you can't wear them into the bathroom, or they don't? Tashma coming here. V'lo b'kamea b'zman she'eno min ha'mumche. So we can learn from our Mishnah the answer, because our Mishnah said that if you have a professional kamea, you're allowed to wear it out on Shabbat. Now wait a second. Now if you're going to tell me that kameot have holiness, and therefore you have to take them off when you go in the bathroom, remember, one of the principles in this parak is we don't wear anything out that you might have to take off at any time outside, because you might carry it. So anything you have to take off to go into the mikveh, for example, a woman wasn't allowed to wear, remember? Anything that you're not allowed to take off, anything she would have to take off for the mikveh. And similarly, anything you'd have to take off, like tefillin, anything you have to take off to go in the bathroom, you're not allowed to wear out, because you might carry it. So then if you have to take kameot off to go in the bathroom, you might carry it. So b'may askinan, maybe what is our Mishnah talking about? B'kameh shel ikarin. That when it said you could wear a kamea out on Shabbat, it's only talking about an herb, homeopathic medicine kamea, which doesn't have God's name in it. It's just a combination of different herbs. That's why you're allowed to wear it out on Shabbat, because you're not going to have to take that off to go into the bathroom, because it doesn't have God's name in it. But maybe you wouldn't be allowed to wear a kamea that has God's name in it, because maybe you're really not allowed to wear it into the bathroom, and it would be a problem. So, v'hatanya, but we learned in a braita, echad kamea shel ketav, echad kamea shel ikarin. Didn't we just learn above? At the very, very end of the last Amud, we learned that both kameot shel with writing and kameot with herbs are the same rule. So you are allowed to wear them out. And if you're allowed to wear them out, that must mean that you're allowed to wear them into the bathroom. Because if you weren't allowed to wear them into the bathroom, you wouldn't be allowed to wear them out. Okay, and rather, what are we talking about? Maybe we're talking about a person who is so sick that that it's pikuach nefesh. They have to wear this kamea on Shabbat. They have to wear it out, because it's pikuach nefesh, it's saving their life, because their life is in danger, and therefore, therefore he's allowed to wear it out, even though. So in other words, we don't impose the gezerah on him. We don't say he can't wear it out because maybe he'll take it off and maybe he'll carry it. Because since it's a matter of saving his life, we're not going to worry about maybe. So the Gemara says, but we learned just before in the same braita. We said it doesn't matter whether the person is gravely, dangerously ill, or if they're just mildly ill. He's allowed to wear it out. So we're stuck. We're talking even about a kamea that has Hashem's name in it. And we're talking about even a person who is not in danger of losing their life. And yet they're allowed to wear it out on Shabbat, which would seem to imply that they must be able to wear it in the bathroom. Because if they had to take it off in a public bathroom, that would mean that they might carry it. And we're not worried about that.
So, unless there's something...
well, that's what the Gemara is going to say.
And something specific that says that if, in this condition, you're allowed to wear it in the bathroom, and in this condition, you're not allowed.
Right, it doesn't say that. So, maybe we can conclude that a person's actually allowed to carry a kamea in their hands. Maybe since it's functioning for medicinal purpose, even if he held it in his hand, it wouldn't be a problem. And that's why we don't say, maybe really you do have to take it off to go into the bathroom. So why aren't we worried though that he's going to carry it? Because maybe even if you carry it, it's okay, because that's how a kamea works even when you hold it in your hand. It's not considered to be carrying. So we move to the next, the top of Samech Bet, Amud Aleph. Va'atani, but we learned in the Brayso, Rabbi Oshaya Omer, u'bilvad shlo yochazenu biyado v'yavenu arba amot b'rshut harabim. Rabbi Oshaya said specifically that you cannot carry it in your hand and walk 4 amot in the public domain. He said you're allowed to wear the kamea as long as you don't do that. Okay, so we're stuck now. If you were allowed to wear it out, okay, and it must be that you don't have to take it to go into the bathroom, because if you had to take it to go into take it off to go into the bathroom, then we should be concerned that you should carry it, and there's no permission to carry it. Okay, so it must be that you don't have to take it off to go in the bathroom, otherwise it wouldn't let you wear it out. Or rather, what are we talking about here? A covered amulet. Because what did they do? They wrote on these little texts that had Hashem's name, they put it in a leather pouch, and you would have the pouch hanging on you. That's what it's talking about. If it's exposed, you can't go in. It's contained within something else.
That means you're allowed to go in the bathroom with it.
Right.
Which is the same halacha when you tefillin.
Right, that's what it's going to say. V'harei tefillin de mechupe or. What about tefillin? That they're also covered with, leather. Right, you don't see the writing of the tefillin, because it's covered with leather. V'tanya, and we learned in the Braita, hanichnas lebeta kiseh choletz tefillin berichuk arba amot v'nichnas. Why is it then that when you go into the bathroom you're not allowed to wear tefillin? You're telling me that being covered with leather protects it, so why are you not allowed to wear tefillin? So the answer is hatam mishum shin. That's because of the shin on the tefillin. The Amar Abaye shin shel tefillin halacha Moshe miSinai, because that shin on the tefillin is a halacha Moshe miSinai. It's something which is considered a letter of God's name, because it's coming from the name Shaddai, God's name. So the exterior even has God's name on it.
You put it on the bed.
That's why you're not allowed to go into the bathroom wearing with the tefillin exposed. Okay, Va'amar Abaye dalet shel tefillin halacha Moshe miSinai. Va'amar Abaye yod shel tefillin halacha Moshe miSinai, because Abaye said 2 things: the shin and the dalet and the yud of the tefillin, that they are all considered to be halacha Moshe miSinai. Right? And they spell the word Shaddai. The shin is on the rosh, shel rosh. The dalet is on the back of the shel rosh. The yud is on the arm of the shel yad. So what you see is that these letters then are considered to be God's name. The external, in other words, there's an exterior expression of God's name in the tefillin. That's why you're not allowed to wear it. But with the kamea, you're allowed to wear it into the bathroom because it's completely covered, and there's nothing on the covering of the kamea that has God's name. So that's why you're allowed to wear it in the bathroom, and that's why you're allowed to wear it on Shabbat, because since on Shabbat you can wear it into the bathroom, we don't have to be concerned that you're going to take it off and carry it. And we'll just do this last little piece so we can be up to the Mishnah tomorrow. That the Mishnah at the end had said you can't wear these 3 things. Shiryon is zarda, which means, and it just explains the words. Shiryon is zarda, which means you're not allowed to wear male armor. Velo bekasda. What's kasda? Amarav sanvarta, which Rashi says is a reference to they would wear a leather covering over their head, on top of which they would put the helmet. So these are all basically armor, different types of armor. So if you imagine a knight from medieval times, right? They had the armor here, they had the things on their legs, and they had and they had the helmet. So you're not allowed to wear that. Even the cap that goes under the helmet, you're not allowed to wear. You're not allowed to wear the armor. And the magafayim are amar Rav Pazmike. That's a reference to the shin guards, basically, that they would wear, these metal shin guards when they would go out to battle, which is another type of armor that they would wear. So what are these 3 things? Types of armor. Wearing them is definitely derech malbush. It's definitely considered wearing, so you wouldn't be considered carrying on Shabbat. But since they're not considered appropriate Shabbat attire, therefore one is not allowed to wear them out on Shabbat. And tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll start the new Mishnah.